Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're starting with a feeling I think, well, pretty much everyone recognizes at some point. That moment of looking back and thinking, gosh, I wish I knew then what I know now.
Oh, yes, the classic lament, isn't it? Usually we think about that with, bad investments or maybe relationship mistakes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what happens when that feeling, that really intense regret, comes from someone whose life looks like, well, the absolute pinnacle of professional success?
That's a whole different level of paradox.
It really is. And that's precisely our starting point for this deep dive. We're looking into some really personal reflections from let's say, highly successful, definitely sometimes controversial, former pro cricketer.
Right.
And we're using his journey really as a kind of shortcut to understand the hidden internal stuff,
Yeah.
the mechanics of failure that can happen, even when, the scoreboard, the CV, everything screams victory.
With his country over 300 times. That's huge. 2 World Cups, 2 Allen Border medals, the top award in Australian cricket, 2 Indian Premier League MVP awards. I mean, objectively, this is a winner's career, no question.
He succeeded everywhere, different formats, different countries, across decades almost.
And yet,
And yet, he admits that pretty much the whole time, he was fighting this internal war against himself. Despite all the skill, all the training, the physical conditioning, he was constantly, frequently self-sabotaging.
Mhm.
He even brings up that classic cricket saying, which I think really sets up what we're trying to understand today. Most of the time, you get yourself out.
That phrase just nails it, doesn't it? It really distills so much about high performance.
It does.
I mean, think about it. If the bowler bowls an absolute peach of a delivery, something unplayable, well, fair enough, you tip your hat. That's external pressure doing its job.
Right, you got beaten by skill.
Exactly. But when you play, like a terrible shot, a really loose waft outside off stump at a ball you should have just let go, or when you just completely freeze up under pressure, that's different.
That's internal.
That's a mental collapse. And the author recognized, looking back, that for something like 15 years, his own internal dialogue, his mindset, was actively getting in the way of him reaching his absolute best.
And that's really the mission here for you listening. It doesn't matter if you're, say, managing a team at work or studying for exams or maybe coaching kids sport on the weekend.
Uh-huh.
We're going to try and isolate these specific internal fights that systematically undermined an athlete who, on paper, had every single technical advantage you could imagine.
Yeah.
It really shows that the mind, well, it's the final frontier, isn't it?
Mhm.
And often the most neglected one when it comes to peak performance.
Absolutely. And if someone operating at that kind of elite level struggled with these sort of fundamental mental blocks for nearly 2 decades, well, we really need to pay attention to how he eventually found a solution.
Right.
It just proves, doesn't it, that technical skill, raw talent, it can only take you so far. At some point, that internal operating system, your mental approach, it needs a serious upgrade. Or maybe even a complete overhaul.
Okay, so let's unpack that core regret he talks about. He's incredibly upfront, saying, I wish I knew how I was mentally sabotaging my own performance. What were the specific things, the mechanisms that were draining his energy and blocking his own skills?
Well, it seems like they fall pretty neatly into failures of, let's call it, internal resource management. The first big one, the first major barrier was just a fundamental inability to manage his focus and his mental energy effectively.
Okay.
He explicitly says he lamented burning mental energy through incorrect focus.
Right. So think of focus like a battery,
Yeah,
a finite resource you take out there, whether it's the cricket pitch or, I don't know, a high-stakes presentation.
Yep, exactly like a battery. And if you're pointing that focus, that energy at the wrong things, worrying about the outcome, fearing failure, replaying past mistakes, you're just draining that battery before you even need to perform the task at hand.
So it's not just having focus, it's the direction of that focus that's critical. If you're focusing on, oh no, what if I fail? Or what if I don't get this contract? Or what if I mess up this shot? That energy isn't going into actually doing the thing.
Precisely. It's being diverted. And the main culprit he identified for that diversion, it was the relentless negative mind chatter, that little voice inside.
We all have that voice though, don't we?
Absolutely. He wasn't unique in having the voice. His failure, as he saw it later, was in being controlled by it. He felt he lacked the ability to, as he put it, take control of that little voice and redirect the script.
So instead of directing his own internal movie, He was just sitting in the audience watching a really negative review of his own performance.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was just passively listening to this constant negative commentary track.
And what's really interesting is this sort of fundamental psychological insight he discovered later that explained why redirecting that script is so vital. It's almost deceptively simple.
The one thought at a time idea.
Exactly. The fact that the human brain, consciously, can really only process one thought at a time. It sounds almost trivial, but understanding that, he realized, unlocks the whole strategy.
It really is the practical key, isn't it? Because if you truly grasp that you can only hold one conscious thought, then the way you combat negative chatter changes completely. You don't necessarily fight the negative thought head on.
You replace it.
You just occupy its space. You proactively insert the correct thought. His failure, he recognized, was not consistently ensuring the right process-focused thought was firmly in place, actively blocking the wrong result-focused anxious thought from even getting a foothold.
Okay, let's make that really concrete. So if you're a batter facing a crucial moment,
Yeah.
the wrong thought is don't get out. If I get out now, we lose.
Right. Pure result focus, pure fear.
The right thought, the process thought would be something like watch the ball, head steady, beat it under my eyes.
Exactly. Something immediate, tangible, controllable. Watch the seam rotation, feel my feet position, whatever the technical cue is. If your conscious mind is fully occupied with that, it literally doesn't have the bandwidth to simultaneously process the fear of what if I fail?
It crowds it out.
It crowds it out. Simple, but incredibly powerful if you can master it.
And that failure in thought management, that inability to crowd out the fear, leads directly into the second barrier you mentioned.
Yeah, it flows naturally into barrier 2.
Oh.
The crippling effect of fear, anxiety, and being completely fatally result-oriented. And the book gives this just stunningly vivid example from his very early career that really set the template for this pattern.
The Australian Under-19 National Championships, playing against Victoria. She's just a teenager, right? 16.
16 years old, desperate to impress, desperate to make the national under-19 team. So objectively, the stakes are developmental. It's about identifying talent. But for him, internally,
It felt existential. Life or death.
pretty much. He describes being utterly paralyzed by the fear of failure. And listen to this phrasing. He was tying himself in knots, trying not to get out.
Trying not to fail rather than trying to succeed. That's a huge distinction.
It's crucial because when your entire focus, your entire physical and mental energy is geared towards avoidance, avoiding failure, avoiding getting out what happens, your body tenses up, your muscles get rigid.
Your instincts dull.
Exactly. Your natural reactions, your fluidity, that flow state we all aspire to, it just vanishes. You become tight, hesitant.
So his body was essentially betraying him
Mm-hmm.
because his mind was just locked down in fear mode. He'd spent years, presumably, honing technique, batting practice.
Hours and hours. But he says because he was so frozen, so anxious, so focused on the result, he simply couldn't access those skills. They were there, theoretically, but fear had basically locked the door.
And the outcome, the actual cricket moment.
It's almost textbook. He got what he describes as a gift drag down, basically. A short, wide ball from the spinner, easy pickings for a cut shot.
A run-scoring opportunity.
Absolutely, the kind of ball you lick your lips at. But because he was so internally knotted up, he just fluffed it. Played a weak, tentative cut shot straight to the fielder at point, out.
So the technical failure was a direct symptom of the internal state.
100%. He wasn't seeing the ball and reacting with his ingrained skill. He was seeing the consequence, the potential failure, the fear of getting out, and that overloaded his entire system. He couldn't execute a basic practiced shot.
It really highlights that lack of understanding back then of just focusing on the process, right? Just watch the ball, play the shot, and trust that if you do that enough times, the results will generally take care of themselves.
It sounds so simple when we say it like this, doesn't it?
Deceptively simple.
Yeah. But under real pressure, the mind's default setting, its survival instinct, kicks in. And survival mode means focusing on the biggest perceived threat, which in performance situations is almost always the negative consequence of failure.
Okay, so we have incorrect focus draining energy, negative chatter taking control, and this paralyzing fear driven by result orientation. What was the third piece?
Well, that failure to shift from being result-focused to process-focused and repeating that mistake points to the third critical barrier, the complete absence of a reliable, repeatable system or model for his mental game.
So it wasn't just one-off failures, it was a pattern.
A deeply ingrained pattern. The author makes this really quite tragic point. He played professionally for 15 years, and yet he found himself repeating the same mental mistakes over and over again.
15 years at the top level.
Yeah.
That's brutal. To realize you haven't learned how to fix the fundamental mental block.
It's incredibly frustrating to read. All that talent, all that hard work on the physical and technical side, but constantly undermined by the same internal issues. He had this realization later that peak performance, those times when he felt in the zone, it tended to find me rather than the other way around.
So it felt like luck, like some random confluence of factors he couldn't control or replicate.
Exactly. He was waiting for the stars to align, waiting for that feeling of confidence and flow to just arrive, instead of having the tools, the mental skills, to actively engineer that state, or at least get closer to it more consistently.
It sounds like he was this incredible craftsman, with the finest tools, his batting technique, his fitness. But he didn't have the operator's manual for the most important tool of all.
His own mind, that's precisely it. He says he desperately wished he'd had a mental performance model that I could turn to and trust when things went off track.
Something reliable, a protocol.
Yeah, a what to do when. Guide for his own head. When things started to go sideways during an innings, when the pressure mounted, when the negative thoughts began to spiral, he couldn't really diagnose the problem beyond just feeling stressed or anxious. And he certainly didn't have a clear practice procedure to fix it.
So that lack of a system meant that all his amazing technical abilities were just, well, sometimes they were available, sometimes they weren't, locked away behind this inconsistent, fragile mental gate.
Perfectly put. He had world-class talent, absolutely. But he lacked the mental consistency, the reliability under pressure that separates the truly great, consistently elite performers from the merely very good, occasional brilliant ones.
Wow. Okay, so these barriers were clearly established early on.
Yeah.
But did they lessen with experience?
Well, that's what makes this account so powerful and frankly so relatable even for those of us not facing 90-mile fast bowlers. These weren't just teething problems of youth. This mental vulnerability, this pattern of self-sabotage, it persisted. It even, you could argue, metastasized later in his career.
Right, which really shows how stubborn these ingrained mental habits can be if you don't have the right tools to address them.
Exactly. And the source material provides this incredibly vivid, almost painful anecdote from very late in his career that serves as the ultimate example of these struggles coming home to roost.
We're jumping forward quite a bit now to one of his final test matches. It was against India, January 2015, at the Sydney Cricket Ground, the SCG.
Yeah, a huge match, iconic ground. And for him, personally, it felt like the culmination of all these pre-solution mental struggles.
Set the scene for us. What was the context? Why was this match such a pressure point?
Well, it was basically a perfect storm of high-pressure factors. Externally, the scrutiny was immense. He'd had a terrible series leading up to this final test, scored virtually no runs.
Okay, so his spot in the team was genuinely under threat.
Massively. His place in the test side, arguably his entire legacy in the longest format of the game, felt like it was hanging by a thread. The external pressure couldn't have been higher.
And then there was the media adding fuel to the fire.
Oh, yeah. He describes this press conference just before the match where a journalist, in his words, nailed him, basically publicly questioned his form, his value to the team, essentially asking why he was still being picked.
Ouch. That's brutal. That kind of public calling out, questioning your right to even be there, that was just amplified every single insecurity that was planted way back in that under-19s match we talked about.
You have to imagine it did. It connects right back to that core fear of failure, of not being good enough. So huge external pressure, personal legacy on the line, public humiliation. The stage was set for a mental battle.
And what happened? When the crisis hit, when he went out to bat in that match, how did he respond mentally?
Did he rise to the occasion with the wisdom of a 15-year veteran? No. He reverted. He fell straight back into what he calls his default mindset.
Which was?
He describes himself feeling like that timid teenager from the under-19s championship, absolutely consumed by the fear, terrified of getting out.
Wow. So the stakes were astronomically higher, a crucial test match versus an underage game. But the internal mental response, that core feeling, was identical to when he was 16.
Exactly the same pattern, fear of failure driving everything. Now, here's the really interesting, almost counterintuitive part of the story. He actually scored runs in that innings.
Oh, how many?
He made 81, and he batted for a long time, something like 4 hours.
Okay, well, 81 runs in a test match, batting for 4 hours. On the surface, that sounds pretty decent, right? Most players would take that.
For sure. Objectively, 81 is a respectable score. But for the author, looking back through the lens of his internal experience, he regards this innings as one of his biggest failures
Why? How can a score like 81 be seen as a total internal collapse?
because of how it was made. He insists that the 81 was built entirely on tension, on anxiety, on just grimly hanging on. It wasn't built on command or control or fluency.
So he was surviving, not dominating.
Precisely. He even mentions getting help from what he calls generous bowling from Suresh Raina, who was a part-time spinner, essentially suggesting he was gifted runs, allowed to survive against easier bowling rather than mastering the situation. The score itself, the 81, it was just a number that masked the profound internal stress and struggle. He was playing out of fear, not flow.
That sounds utterly exhausting, 4 hours at the crease, but the primary mental focus is just not failing, rather than proactively looking to score, to play your shots.
Mentally debilitating, you'd imagine. Just grinding it out, consumed by anxiety. And the way the innings ended really confirmed his psychological state for him.
How did he get out?
He describes his dismissal as resulting from indecisive batting. He ended up playing, in his own words, one of the worst shots of his career. He basically spooned a catch to a fielder in the deep.
Okay.
But here's the kicker. It was to a fielder whom he knew was positioned exactly there, halfway to the boundary, specifically for that type of shot. The trap was set. He saw the trap.
And he hit it straight to him anyway.
It hit it straight to him anyway.
So the technical mistake, playing the wrong shot, was a direct result of the mental fog, the indecision.
That's how he frames it. He had the information. He knew the fielder was there. But the paralyzing indecision, caught between attack and defense, between playing the shot and blocking it, resulted in this horrible half-committed stroke, neither one thing nor the other.
And indecision, particularly at that level of sport, it's usually fatal, isn't it?
Almost always. It's a clear signal that the mental process, the clarity of thought, has completely broken down. He wasn't thinking clearly. He was reacting, almost flailing out of anxiety. He actually described that dismissal, that specific moment, as the final straw for him in Test cricket.
Really?
Yeah. He played only 3 more Test matches after that SCG game. He knew deep down he never wanted to feel like that, to bat like that, ever again.
But the crucial, heartbreaking point is...
He still had no idea how to actually stop himself from doing it again if the pressure came on. His Test career, the pinnacle format, effectively ended with him feeling, as he put it, as much in the dark as ever about how to manage his own mind under pressure.
What a story. It's just,
Yeah.
it's the ultimate illustration, isn't it? All the experience, all the talent, all the professional support over the years, and still he walks away from Test cricket defeated not really by opponents or age or injury, but by his own internal struggles.
It absolutely underscores the core message. Just being exposed to high stakes, playing professionally for years and years, it doesn't automatically grant you the mental skills you need. You need specific, targeted knowledge and tools.
Which leads us to the next big question. Why? Yeah, exactly. Why did this happen? Why does an athlete at the absolute peak of a global sport, surrounded by coaches and support staff, go for 15, nearly 20 years, repeating the same fundamental mental error without finding an effective, lasting solution?
Well, the author himself points pretty directly at what he sees as a systemic issue, a kind of cultural blind spot within the sport, and probably within many high-performance environments. He laments the amazing how much emphasis there was on the technical side of cricket, how little on the mental side.
The classic technique versus mind debate.
Exactly. And it's not just cricket, is it? It's pretty universal in any field where performance outcomes are easily measured. Technical skills, your golf swing, your coding efficiency, your surgical precision, your batting technique, they're tangible. You can see them.
You can film them, analyze them, break them down into tiny components, drill them over and over again. They feel controllable, improvable in a linear way.
Precisely. The mental side, though. Things like focus, anxiety management, confidence, dealing with pressure, that's messier, isn't it? It's internal. It's harder to quantify.
Yeah, how do you measure mental toughness on a spreadsheet?
Yeah.
How do you run a drill for redirecting negative thoughts?
Right. And because it's harder to measure and harder to coach in that traditional mechanical way, the tendency often is to either ignore it or worse, to just dismiss it as something innate. You know, oh, he's just mentally fragile, or she's just naturally composed.
As if it's a fixed trait, not a skill that can be learned and developed.
Exactly. And the source material really shows how this cultural bias towards the technical and the neglect of the mental impacted his entire development pathway. He actually did have some exposure to mental skills training early on.
Oh, really? When was that?
He mentions getting some sort of mental skills work when he was 16 as part of the Queensland State Underage Cricket Pathway System. So the system wasn't completely devoid of it.
But obviously it didn't stick. It didn't solve the problem we saw in that under-19s match.
No. And his reflection on why it didn't stick is really instructive, I think, for anyone involved in training or coaching in any field.
What did he say?
He felt that the early training he received didn't simplify things enough for him.
Didn't simplify things enough. Okay, that's interesting. What does that imply? Too academic, too abstract.
That's how I read it. If the mental model being taught is too complex, too theoretical, too philosophical, it just doesn't translate when the pressure hits. When you've got a fraction of a second to react to a fast bowler or make a crucial decision in a meeting.
You don't need a PhD thesis on resilience.
Exactly. You need something simple, something immediate, an anchor, a clear process, a rule of thumb. It sounds like those early attempts failed to provide that level of actionable simplicity and clarity.
So even when he reached the very top, playing for the Australian national team, the best in the world, surrounded by resources, the problem still wasn't solved systemically.
Apparently not. He acknowledges having access to sports psychologists within the Australian team set up over the years. These are highly qualified people, presumably.
You would assume so.
Yet the fundamental issue, that pattern of self-sabotage under pressure, it was never truly cracked.
Why not, do you think? What was missing even at that elite level?
His description is telling. He says he received pieces of valuable information from these experts over the years. So, not useless encounters. He got useful nuggets.
Okay.
But, and this is the crucial part, he couldn't piece it all together.
Ah. So it was fragmented.
Yeah.
Like getting random pages from an instruction manual, but never the full blueprint.
That's a perfect analogy. Imagine getting spare parts for a really complex engine. You might get a high-quality piston here, a spark plug there, maybe a bit of wiring loom, but without the overall schematic, without understanding how they all integrate and work together as a system.
They're just bits and pieces. Useless when the engine needs to run smoothly under load.
Precisely. When the pressure really came on, he needed to be able to rely on an integrated, coherent system for managing his mind, not just desperately try to recall some scattered collection of tips or breathing exercises he had heard once.
It sounds like the difference between knowing intellectually what you probably could do, like focus on the process, not the result, and having a clear, practiced, step-by-step how. A procedure you can actually execute when fear and anxiety are trying to hijack your brain.
I think that's exactly it. The focus might have been too much on treating the symptoms. Okay, you're feeling anxious. Try this relaxation technique, without providing that foundational model that explained the underlying mechanism of the self-sabotage and offered a simple, unified way to counteract it.
So 20 years surrounded by experts in elite sport.
Mm-hmm.
And the core message either didn't resonate, wasn't delivered effectively, or maybe he just wasn't in the right headspace to receive it yet. But ultimately, it failed to stick. He didn't provide that practical, unified, instantly usable framework he needed.
Yeah. And that systemic failure, that cultural gap, is a massive takeaway, isn't it? Not just for sport, but for businesses, for education, for any organization trying to develop high performers.
Definitely. If you're just giving your top people fragmented advice on, say, stress management or focus, but you're not equipping them with a clear, simple, actionable system they can trust and deploy under maximum duress.
You're basically setting them up to repeat the same mistakes indefinitely, just like he did for 15 years.
Which makes the eventual breakthrough even more remarkable. How did it finally happen?
Right, so after literally 2 decades stuck in this loop, this cycle of high performance, followed by pressure, then self-sabotage, then frustration, then maybe some fragmented advice that didn't quite land, the actual turning point, the catalyst for real change, it didn't come from within the cricket world at all.
No. Not another coach or sports psychologist.
Nope. It came from a completely unexpected place. An improbable, you might even say lucky, chance encounter.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It was 2015. He found himself at a function that had nothing to do with cricket. It was actually a rugby league awards night.
Random.
Totally random. And just by chance, by the seating plan, he ended up sitting next to Will Power.
Will Power, the Australian IndyCar champion.
The very same. Talk about different worlds, right? One guy dealing with the spin and bounce of a cricket ball, the other wrestling a race car doing over 200 miles an hour.
Completely different physical skills, different environments, different types of pressure. Or are they?
Well, that's what's fascinating. The difference in their sporting domains turned out to be completely irrelevant. because very quickly their conversation moved past the superficial stuff and landed right on the deep common ground of the performance issues they were both, in the author's words, wrestling with.
So they found a shared vulnerability, despite the wildly different contexts.
Immediately, the conversation went straight to the psychological core, bypassing all the technical jargon of their respective sports.
And what was it that really clicked? What created that deep connection between a cricketer and a racing driver?
It wasn't actually a discussion about tactics or technique. According to the author, the real catalyst, the thing that forged this immediate bond, was a conversation rooted in shared trauma.
Trauma. Okay. How so?
Will Power started talking very openly about the immense impact that the death of a close friend, another driver, during a race had had on him. He described how it had fundamentally affected him, saying it had basically broken him for a time.
Wow.
Yeah, impacting not just his performance on the track, but his relationships, his general well-being, everything.
That's heavy stuff for an awards night dinner conversation.
Incredibly raw. But the author writes that he immediately saw the parallel. He instantly connected Power's experience to the devastating effect that the death of a fellow cricketer from his own generation had had just the year before.
Yes, I remember that time. It shook the whole cricketing world.
Absolutely. And for the author, personally, it seems that event had dramatically raised the emotional stakes of everything. It wasn't just about scoring runs or fear of failure anymore. Suddenly, mortality, real risk, it felt much closer.
So that shared experience of dealing with loss, and perhaps a heightened sense of danger in their respective sports, that created the connection.
It seems so. The author explains how that cricketer's death had intensified all the stress he was already feeling about his own underperformance on the field. But crucially, he also realized it had started eating away at my life at home.
Right. That detail you mentioned earlier, the performance stress bleeding into family life.
Yeah, he gives this really poignant example of finding it difficult to just relax and enjoy simple things, like playing in the backyard with his 2-year-old son. The constant internal pressure, the negative mind chatter, it wasn't staying contained within the boundaries of the cricket field anymore. It was affecting his emotional capacity as a husband and father.
That's often the sign, isn't it? When the professional stress starts poisoning your personal life, you know the system is fundamentally broken.
Absolutely. And in that conversation with Will Power, they both had this realization. They were both, perhaps for the first time in their long careers, trying to perform at an elite level while simultaneously grappling with a genuine fear for our lives.
That's a profound shared burden, going from worrying about getting out to worrying about actual survival while still needing to perform.
It created this immediate, raw psychological connection, a level of trust based on surviving or trying to survive, similar kinds of intense psychological pressure and trauma.
And because Will Power had already started down the path of addressing his own issues.
Exactly. Power had already sought help to deal with the aftermath of his friend's death and the performance blocks it created, so he was in a position to offer more than just sympathy. He could offer a concrete next step.
The introduction.
The introduction. Will Power told him about the person who had helped him navigate all this, his mental skills coach, your guru, Dr. Jacques Dallaire, who is based in the United States.
So this wasn't just another casual referral to a generic sports psychologist. This was a recommendation born from shared, deep, almost existential struggle.
Precisely. It felt different. It landed differently. After 2 decades of hitting brick walls, of fragmented advice, of the message not quite getting through, the author was finally, perhaps because of that recent trauma and the connection with Power, in a state of maximum emotional readiness. He was truly receptive to finding a real, systemized, external solution.
The catalyst wasn't just the meeting, it was the timing and the shared emotional context.
Absolutely. The right person, the right message at the exact right time. #6, the 2-day revelation and practical application.
Okay, so the narrative takes this dramatic turn. From almost 2 decades of frustration and darkness, suddenly there's a ray of hope, a potential solution delivered via an IndyCar driver at a rugby league dinner. So who was this Dr. Jacques Dallaire? What made him the guy who could finally provide the answers?
Well, Dr. Dallaire wasn't primarily known in the cricket world, obviously. He was, and I believe still is, a very well-regarded performance expert. But his roots and main area of expertise were in environments where mental clarity under extreme pressure is, well, non-negotiable.
Like motor racing.
Exactly. His core work was with Formula One and IndyCar drivers, including, obviously, willpower. These are guys making split-second decisions at incredible speeds where a tiny lapse in focus can have catastrophic consequences.
Right. The cost of mental error is incredibly high.
Absolutely. But his expertise wasn't limited to the racetrack. The source mentions he also worked with fighter pilots,
Okay.
special forces personnel,
Wow.
and also high-level business leaders. So a diverse portfolio, but the common thread seems to be optimizing performance in scenarios where stakes are incredibly high, pressure is intense, and mental mistakes can be fatal, either literally or figuratively.
So the training methodologies developed for those kinds of fields, they'd have to be incredibly robust, practical, and reliable under fire, wouldn't they? No room for vague philosophies.
You'd have to assume so. And that emphasis on rigor and practicality seems to be exactly what resonated with the author immediately. He was so impressed just by their first phone conversation, the clarity, the directness, the focus on actionable strategies, that he didn't hesitate.
What did he do?
He got on a plane, flew all the way to Charlotte, North Carolina, where Dr. Dallaire was based, specifically to enroll in his mental skills program.
That's a big commitment. Flying halfway around the world based on a recommendation and a phone call.
It shows how desperate he was for a real solution by that point, doesn't it? He mentions viewing it as a worthwhile investment, even if he only came away with one single nugget of gold
Yeah.
that he could potentially use in his own coaching career down the line.
He'd finally reached a point where fixing his mental game felt like the absolute top priority.
Right.
Worth the time, worth the expense.
Completely. And the payoff, according to the text, was just astonishingly fast.
How fast?
The breakthrough, the moment where it all finally clicked into place, it took just 2 days.
2 days. Seriously, after nearly 20 years of searching and struggling.
2 days. That contrast is just, it's the mic drop moment of the story, isn't it? He explicitly says he regretted, profoundly, not having had access to those 2 days of learning right at the very start of his professional career. Imagine the difference it could have made.
Unbelievable. So what was it? What was the magic? What made Dr. Dallaire's approach so different, so effective, compared to everything else he'd encountered over 2 decades?
The author boils it down to 2 key things. It was so practical and so memorable.
Practical and memorable. Okay, let's unpack that. What does practical mean in this context?
It suggests a complete departure from the abstract theoretical advice he'd received before. It implies Dallaire didn't just talk about concepts like focus or process. He gave him concrete tools and routines. Simple, clear, step-by-step procedures.
Like a checklist for the mind, or specific anchor words, or a physical routine to break the negative cycle.
Exactly that kind of thing. We have to speculate a bit, but based on methods used in similar high-pressure fields, it likely involved things like 1. Recognizing the trigger, the negative thought, the feeling of pressure. 2. Having an immediate interrupt signal, maybe a specific word, a physical action like adjusting equipment, a specific type of breath. 3. Instantly redirecting focus onto a predetermined, simple, controllable process cue, like watch the ball, feel my feet, smooth trigger movement.
So a short, sharp practice routine that could be deployed instantly, almost automatically, the moment the negative spiral started.
Precisely. Something so ingrained it could override the fear response before it fully took hold and paralyzed the system. Practical means usable in the moment, under fire.
And memorable, what does that suggest?
To me, that suggests simplicity and clarity. The model, the framework Dallaire presented, must have been easy to understand, easy to recall under pressure. No complex jargon, no confusing layers, just a clear, core set of principles and actions.
He finally felt like he understood not just the what and the how of playing cricket, but the fundamental why of sport itself.
That's what he says. It sounds like Dallaire provided the missing piece, the operating manual for the internal game. The framework that finally allowed him to take all those fragmented nuggets of valuable information he'd collected over the years and organize them into a single, coherent, trustable system.
He finally had a mental model he could rely on when things went off track.
Exactly. He wasn't just hoping to feel good. He had a procedure to follow to manage his internal state, regardless of the external situation. He gained the power to interrupt the old destructive patterns.
And the proof is in the pudding, right? Did it actually translate to better, more consistent performance on the field?
According to him, absolutely. The transformation was profound and sustained. For the next 4 years, as he transitioned into primarily playing white ball cricket, especially in the high-pressure cauldron of T20 leagues like the IPL.
Environments known for intense pressure and scrutiny.
Totally. He says he became obsessed with applying Jacques' teachings in these complex, high-stakes situations, the very kinds of situations that had caused him to mentally disintegrate just a few years earlier at the SCG.
And the outcome.
He states quite plainly that he played the most consistently successful and enjoyable cricket of my life in my mid to late 30s.
Consistently successful and enjoyable. That last word is key, isn't it?
It really is. When you're not constantly battling yourself, when you feel in control of your internal state, performance naturally becomes more fluid, more consistent, and crucially, more fulfilling. The struggle dissipates. He finally learned how to access that peak state or something close to it more reliably on demand rather than just waiting for it to find him.
An incredible turnaround. From the depths of the SEG despair to the most successful and enjoyable period of his career, all unlocked by a 2-day mental skills program.
It's a powerful testament to the impact of finding the right system, delivered in the right way at the right time. #Tag the next evolution of high performance.
So this late career revelation, this unlocking of his own potential through Dr. Dallaire's system, it didn't just change his playing experience. It clearly fundamentally shifted his whole perspective on performance and coaching afterward.
Absolutely. It became his new lens for understanding high performance. He mentions that when he moved into coaching, he found that the most stimulating, the most rewarding part of the job was coaching the individual, not just the player.
That distinction again, individual versus player. What does that mean in a practical coaching sense?
It means looking beyond just the technique, beyond the stats. It means recognizing you're not just tweaking a backlift or adjusting a field setting, you're working with a human being.
Right. A human being who brings their own internal baggage, their fears, maybe external life stresses, their ingrained habits of thought, their patterns of self-sabotage, just like he did.
Exactly. It's about understanding the person inside the uniform, the mind operating the machine. And he saw the need for this perspective crystal clear when he worked as an assistant coach under Ricky Ponting at the Delhi Capitals in the IPL.
Okay, the Indian Premier League. That's like the absolute global pinnacle of T20 cricket, right? The best players from all over the world.
Without doubt, the concentration of talent is immense. These players, by the time they get to the IPL, they are already technically superb. They have incredible skills, they're supremely fit, they have immense power, they're incredibly dedicated, they've maxed out most of the traditional performance metrics.
So if everyone is already technically brilliant and physically peaked, where does the competitive advantage come from? Why, he asks, do coaches still spend so much time treating these elite athletes as though they're bits of machinery?
Always looking for that tiny 1% technical flaw to fix.
Yeah, constantly tweaking the mechanics.
Well, his argument is, because it's the easy part, it's the familiar part, it's the quantifiable part we talked about earlier.
But the returns are diminishing.
That's his strong belief. He argues forcefully that the marginal gains you get from refining already near-perfect technique are becoming smaller and smaller at the elite level. He believes the real next frontier, the next step in cricket's evolution, isn't going to come from inventing radical new shots or unearthing more mystery bowlers or even crunching ever more complex data analytics.
Where is it then?
It's in the mind. He states it will be about training cricketers' minds, training them to be able to reproduce their existing brilliant skills and execute their well-thought-out strategies more consistently, especially under pressure.
So when the top, say, 50 batters or bowlers in the world are all technically magnificent, the real differentiator becomes who can hold their nerve, who can manage their internal state when the pressure is at its absolute peak.
That's the core argument. The mental game becomes the primary battleground for consistent competitive advantage. Who can access their best skills when it matters most?
And this brings us right back to the listener, doesn't it? Because if this focus on mastering the internal state is the next big leap for elite global sport, well, the underlying principles must apply far more broadly.
He emphasizes this explicitly. These mental skills, this ability to manage focus, redirect negative thoughts, stay process-oriented under pressure, they are not cricket-specific. They are not even sport-specific. They are, in his words, totally universal.
So whether you're facing that crucial client presentation or leading a really complex project at work with tight deadlines, or maybe just trying to study effectively for final exams,
Or even navigating difficult conversations in your relationships, or trying to be a more patient parent, the underlying failure mechanisms are often identical.
That tendency towards result orientation, that fear of failure paralyzing you, that negative mind chatter just consuming all your bandwidth and energy.
It's the same internal battle, just playing out on a different field. And therefore, the solutions developing a practical, reliable mental system are equally applicable.
So this knowledge, this approach, isn't just about hitting a cricket ball better. It's fundamentally about unlocking the skills and potential you already possess in any area of life.
Exactly. You've likely spent years building your competence, your technical expertise in your field, your professional knowledge. This mental training is the key that helps you unlock all of that, helps you bring the best version of yourself to every performance.
Especially, as he puts it, when the chips are down and your performance really matters.
That's when you need that internal process to be robust, trustworthy, almost automatic, and completely free of that internal friction, that self-sabotage. That's the ultimate goal. Hashtag tag 8, outro.
Wow. What an incredible arc we've followed today. From that, terrified teenager frozen by fear in an under-19s match,
Right.
through almost 2 decades of searching, frustration, getting those fragments of advice, but never the whole picture, to finally, through a chance meeting and a targeted, practical 2-day intervention, unlocking not just peak performance, but also enjoyment in his career right at the end, in his mid-30s.
Yeah, the core insight really stands out, doesn't it? That even the most outwardly successful people, the ones who look like they have it all figured out, are so often held back not by a lack of skill or talent, but by their own minds, by these deep-seated patterns of self-sabotage.
And the solution wasn't just try harder or be tougher. It was finding a practical, systematic, repeatable mental model, something tangible to rely on.
It really reframes what we think of as high performance, I think. It suggests it's less about brute force or just pushing through pain and much more about intelligent focus, about mastering that internal narrative, managing your mental energy effectively.
And the author himself underlined the universality of this. He said that when he thinks, I wish I had known then what I know now, he doesn't just mean for his cricket. He means it, he said, in all aspects of my life.
That's powerful. If mastering the mind is the crucial next step for elite athletes under insane pressure, it surely holds immense potential for the rest of us in our everyday challenges.
Absolutely. So that leads us to our final thought, our provocation for you, the listener, to maybe reflect on after this.
Okay.
If mastering your mind specifically, learning how to consciously recognize and redirect that negative self-talk, and how to ruthlessly focus on the immediate process instead of the potential outcome, if that's the key evolutionary step for a world-class athlete, where might your current focus be holding you back?
Yeah, that's the question to sit with. Look at your own life, your work, your studies, maybe even your interactions at home. Where do you feel that internal process versus result battle playing out?
Are there moments, those times when things really matter, where you feel yourself freezing up, getting anxious, becoming indecisive,
Yeah.
because you're so fixated on the potential negative outcome?
Instead of just calmly focusing on the very next small, manageable step right in front of you, finding or even creating your own simple, practical mental model for those moments, well, it might just be the key to unlocking a level of performance or maybe even just peace of mind that you've always suspected was in there but couldn't quite access consistently.
Something to definitely think about. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. We really hope this exploration into the inner game, the mental side of high performance has been insightful.
Yeah, hopefully stimulating and maybe even provided some practical pointers for your own journey. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.